The story begins in December 2022, focusing on Dan Forrester, Chris Pratt, a biology teacher and former Green Beret. Dan is a devoted family man, living with his wife Emmy, Betty Gilpin, and their young daughter Murray, Ryan Kira Armstrong. Despite his military background, Dan's true passion lies in science, and he eagerly hopes to land a job at a prestigious research center. However, during a job interview, Dan receives a disappointing rejection, crushing his dream of working in scientific research. Crestfallen, he returns home and watches the 2022 FIFA World Cup final with his family and friends, unaware that his life is about to take an extraordinary turn. As the game unfolds, a bizarre phenomenon interrupts the match. Soldiers from the future materialize on the soccer field via a time portal. They announce that they have traveled from the year 2051 with a dire message. In 30 years, humanity faces annihilation due to a brutal alien species known as the White Spikes. These aliens have pushed humanity to the brink of extinction, and the future military desperately needs reinforcements from the present. The world unites to face this common threat, and governments begin a global draft, sending soldiers and civilians alike to fight the future war. Like many civilians, Dan is drafted into the war and fitted with a tracking bracelet that will send him to the future when his tour begins. At home, Emmy, deeply worried for Dan's safety, urges him to seek out his estranged father, James Forrester, J.K. Simmons. James is a Vietnam veteran and a survivalist who lives off the grid. He has the skills to help Dan remove the bracelet, allowing him to avoid the draft. However, Dan harbors resentment towards his father for abandoning him as a child. This strained relationship boils over when Dan visits his father, resulting in a heated argument. Dan's unresolved feelings toward James prevent him from accepting his help, and he leaves, deciding to face the draft alone. Dan, along with other draftees, is transported to the future. But something goes wrong during the jump. Instead of landing safely in a staging area, they are dropped into the middle of a war zone, Miami Beach in ruins, swarming with white spikes. The alien invaders are relentless and far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. These creatures are fast, heavily armed with spikes they can launch from their bodies, and have nearly wiped out the future population. The draftees, many of whom are untrained civilians, are immediately thrust into the chaos, and most are killed within minutes of their arrival. Despite the carnage, Dan and a small group of survivors manage to evade the white spikes. They are quickly given new orders by command to rescue scientists at a nearby research laboratory. The survivors, including Charlie, Sam Richardson, a quirky draftee with a PhD in Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, and Dorian Edwin Hodge, a battle-hardened soldier on his third tour of duty in the future war, head to the lab. When they arrive, they find the facility overrun and the staff slaughtered by the white spikes. However, they recover vital research data on the aliens before the entire area is bombed to prevent further spread of the creatures. The survivors narrowly escape and are transported to a military base in Puerto Plata, the future's last stronghold. At the base, Dan receives shocking news. Command is being led by his own daughter, Murray Forrester Yvonne Strahovski, now a highly skilled military scientist. Dan is stunned to see her as an adult, and their reunion is tense. Murray is distant and focused on her mission, clearly harboring unresolved emotions about their past. She informs Dan that they are working on a critical project, developing a toxin that can kill the white spikes, specifically the female aliens, who are far rarer and more difficult to kill than the males. Murray recruits Dan to help her capture a female white spike, a mission that could turn the tide of the war. Dan, Murray, and their team track down a female white spike, but as soon as they capture her, a massive swarm of males descends upon them, attempting to rescue their queen. The ensuing battle is brutal and chaotic, but Dan and Murray manage to escape with the female white spike, transporting her to a secure facility. However, the battle leaves Dan shaken, as he realizes just how dire the situation is. The future is bleak, and humanity's chances of survival are slim. During this time, Dan notices that Murray seems distant and cold toward him. Eventually, she reveals the painful truth. After Dan returns from the war in the past, he becomes disillusioned and bitter. He grows frustrated with his career and his inability to achieve his research dreams. Marie's bitterness is rooted in the hurt caused by Dan's future actions, but despite her anger, she still sees him as humanity's best hope for survival. She implores him to help complete the toxin that can kill the white spikes. Dan is determined to rewrite this future and be the father Murray deserves. After successfully developing the toxin, Murray and Dan work on mass producing it at the future's last stronghold. Just as they begin the process, the white spikes launch a massive assault on the base. The platform is quickly overwhelmed, and Murray is gravely injured. She knows that humanity's survival is unlikely in this timeline, and with her dying breath, she begs Dan to take the toxin back to the past and prevent the future war from ever happening. She sacrifices herself as Dan escapes, leaving him with the overwhelming responsibility of saving the world and his family. When Dan returns to the present, he is haunted by Marie's death and the knowledge of the bleak future that awaits humanity. Armed with the toxin formula, he goes to the military, hoping they can mass produce it and send it back to the future. However, Dan learns that the jumplink, the time travel technology, was destroyed by the white spikes, cutting off all communication with the future. With no way to return the toxin, Dan feels defeated, until a new theory emerges. Together with Emmy and Charlie, Dan investigates the white spike's origin. After analyzing a piece of the alien's claw, they discover traces of volcanic ash from the Changbai Mountains. This leads them to the realization that the white spikes didn't arrive on Earth in 2048, as previously thought. Instead, they had been on Earth for thousands of years, frozen beneath the ice caps, only to be released by global warming. This discovery gives Dan hope. If they can find where the aliens are buried, they can stop the invasion before it even begins. Dan, now determined to change the future, assembles a small team to find the buried white spikes. He recruits Dorian, who is dying of cancer and wants to go out fighting, and his estranged father, James, who offers to fly them to northern Russia. They travel to Severnaya Zemlya, a desolate, icy region where they believe the white spikes are buried. After days of searching, they finally locate an ancient alien ship encased in ice. Inside the ship, Dan and the team make a startling discovery. The white spikes were not the original inhabitants of the ship. They were cargo, possibly biological weapons, being transported by an unknown alien race that died when the ship crashed. The team injects the toxin into the dormant white spikes, killing many of them, but their actions awaken the remaining aliens. As the white spikes awaken, the team realizes that they must destroy the ship to prevent the aliens from escaping and restarting the invasion. Dorian, knowing he has little time left, decides to sacrifice himself by manually detonating explosives inside the ship. However, the female white spike, the Queen, manages to escape the destruction. In a final showdown, Dan and James chase the female white spike across the frozen tundra. Using all of their skills and experience, they engage in a brutal fight with the alien Queen. In a moment of teamwork and reconciliation, father and son finally put aside their differences and manage to kill the Queen, ensuring that the white spikes will never rise and the future war will never occur. With the white spikes eradicated before they could ever emerge, Dan returns home to his family. He is a changed man, deeply aware of the future that could have been and determined to be a better father and husband. He introduces young Murray to her grandfather, James, signaling a new beginning for their family. The future has been saved, and Dan's legacy is secure. There will be no tomorrow war, and humanity has a chance to thrive.